is on the border, but how do you break up with your friend? I know there is no use to confront her, but how do you say this is the end? I'm through being taken for granted, and the one you call when nobody's home. Being with you means just disappointment, and the last escape, so I've been told. Don't bring that bomber to my door again, my friend. You know that you've been crying wolf too many times before this time. I know it, been there, I've done that. Those words are just sand in my hair. So talk if you like, but words will be words till you bring them to life. So talk if you like, but words will be words till you bring them to life.
Welcome to the show. That was Talk, Talk, Talk by St. Michael featuring Anya Gold. Our guest today is Phillip Baber. I am Mike Vatter, and this is my wonderful co-host. He's still on mute. Unmute. You're still muted. Here you are.
You unmute me?
Nope, there you are. I unmuted you. You didn't unmute yourself.
I didn't mute myself. You muted me.
I muted you back. I think
you muted me.
You tapped on the mute buttons there. Phillip was good. Our guest, he was doing. I think Mike and Mike are too tired. We had rough weekends last weekend. You helped your mom move, and I helped my mom celebrate her 80th birthday. So we were tuckered out this week, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How'd the move go? Good?
It went really well. Really well. She's all set up.
Good. Glad to hear that.
Have her not have everything perfect, so set her up a little suite at my sister's house, so she's all excited.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Well, welcome from the week to the weekend, and welcome, Phillip. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for the invite.
Yes. Of course. We're glad to have you. So, Phillip, you are the pastor of the People's Church of Jacksonville. Is that? Did I say that right? Did I get that?
That is correct.
Okay. I always butchered the the name of your previous church. I'll just say that for the sake of people who may know you from social media or from your time in that church in Jacksonville. The Universalist Unitarian.
You got to flip them. You almost got it.
I'm going to let you say it. I'll let you say it.
Yeah. That was the Unitarian Universalist Church of Jacksonville.
The UUUI.
I think the acronym we went with was UUCJ, but UU for Unitarian Universalist is a pretty good abbreviation.
See, I never got it right, so I just never said it. My friend Phillip, who is the pastor.
There you go.
that church that he's the pastor of is what I always said. I never ever got it right. I'm obviously not a churchgoer, and when I was, it was not that church because I couldn't get it right. He wouldn't let me in.
Internally, the Unitarians and Universalists realize that it's just way too many syllables. We know it's not highly marketable. It's something that we should have changed probably a long time ago, but never quite got around to.
Well, I was raised by a Catholic and a Methodist to be Episcopalian, which was like the weird mix of the two.
Basically it is, yeah.
We were raised Catholic light, so we didn't have to worry about any of the weird acronyms. We just had to worry about the weird rules.
I have to interrupt you for a second and tell you that my dad was Catholic and my mom was Methodist. That's crazy. And they kind of did the same thing. We went to non-denominational church, though.
They named us after saints because they didn't know what else to do.
all of the kids are Irish names because my dad thinks we're Irish.
Well, it's funny because biologically I'm half Jewish, so
there's that in my family as well.
Yeah, I was adopted and found out on my 40th, well, not on my 40th birthday, but for my 40th birthday, my mom got me a 23andMe kit, and we did the spit in a tube thing, and found out that video's on my Facebook if anyone has any interest in watching a 40-minute video of me spitting into a tube. But yeah, it was because I can't do anything in less than an hour apparently. This show was only supposed to be a half-hour show, and every episode's been an hour at least. But I spit into a tube for 40 minutes and then talk about my results on the next video. But yeah, I'm half Jewish, raised Episcopalian, and named after a Catholic saint. So there you go. So this is my religion. Be nice to everybody, and unless they, vote Trump. That's my philosophy on life. But welcome to the show, Philip. I've already gone off track, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk about your new church, the People's Church of Jacksonville. And I think the best way to describe it, to kind of paraphrase your website and your mission statement, is that it bridges the gap with marginalized communities. And you're kind of a religious content creator. Is that kind of a good way to explain it?
I think it's a really good way to explain it, actually. And in terms of, so in terms of kind of how we're trying to serve people right now in this ministry context, it's COVID. We're in a worldwide pandemic. It is not the ideal situation to start a church or to launch a new ministry. So my ministry partner and I, Tyler Burley, who I worked with back at the old church, the UU church we had just been discussing, when we were talking about it, we were kind of thinking like, we need to stop thinking about this like the COVID pandemic is this incredible obstacle, which of course it is, but let's look at this crisis more as an opportunity. So if we're going to try to create a ministry now, and this is the new normal, and I need to retire that phrase, like I think we all need to, but that's what we're in. We're in something that's very different from anything that we've ever faced before, and we just need to accept that. And if we accept that, then what does that mean our ministry should look like to serve folks in this context? And what we came upon is, well, we certainly don't want to be inviting people to a brick and mortar building right now, at least, maybe somewhere in the future that'll be in the cards. I hope so. I think we all hope so, right? But for right now, we want to respect people's social distancing and quarantining. So the best way that we feel like we could make a difference and an impact safely in people's lives is primarily to do kind of like a social media influencer model, which is really weird for me because I'm super technophobic. I'm not good with technology, and I don't know. I just got on Instagram like last week. I don't understand it. It's mostly just pictures, I guess. And Twitter, I suck at Twitter, but I'm on there and trying to figure out why people use Twitter. But we're trying to do social media content creation stuff, kind of get our message out there, serve people in that capacity. We do some gatherings online. There's so much Zoom fatigue, though, that we don't want to overdo it. So we're cautious about that. But yeah, we're just kind of diving into this saying, look, the pandemic is real. That is our new normal. How can we minister to people, feed their spirit, sustain their soul in the reality that we are faced with?
How can people find, before we get too far off track, because I know we will, how can people find your church? How can people find you if they want to reach you, or how do you want people to reach you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we're apparently on all sorts of different social media platforms, but probably the hub would be our website. So if people want to go check out peopleschurchjax.org, peopleschurchjax.org. You go there, there'll be tons of links to all of our social media stuff. So if you're an Instagram person, you can get connected to us there. If you're a Facebook person, you can get connected to us there. And there is a newsletter that we highly encourage you to sign up if you want to, get regular information from us as to what we're up to.
Very cool. And if you would please send us that link. I know you shared it with me individually, but send it to the show, share it on the show page, and I'll also share it on our YouTube and our Facebook. And we'll make sure that we get that out to people. So I wanted to ask you to share the story that you shared with me in our show prep, because you I'll let you kind of share the preface as well. You were talking about your childhood and being raised in this and sort of a strict, and I don't want to put words in your mouth because I think I got this right. You were raised in a strict kind of religious doctrine upbringing, but you went into more of a obviously liberal, open-minded liberal thinking. And I'll give our viewers kind of a history of how you and I met. You and I met at a media training for the Human Rights Ordinance here in Jacksonville. We were kind of learning how to talk to the media about the HRO and how if someone approached someone who was in favor of the HRO getting it passed, someone from the media, how to answer their questions without sounding like we had no idea what we were talking about, because it's an easy thing to be passionate about. And it is something that eventually passed for anyone not watching who's not in Jacksonville. We were one of the last holdouts in the South and in Florida for sure, which is ridiculous. But for the HRO to pass, media was constantly grabbing people coming in and out of City Hall and coming in and out of meetings, and we volunteered to kind of be the voice of the people. And so that's where you and I met, was at a media training, and we got to kind of role play in that scenario. But I was immediately struck by, a man of the cloth so engaged in the LGBTQIA community, but not in a religious way, not in a perspective of you didn't approach it from the side of the cloth. You approached it from the side of a concerned citizen, but you also didn't let the perspective of the cloth away from your pull you away from your thinking. Am I making sense on that?
Yeah, although I would, if I could, I might just tweak a little bit how you framed that at the end there, because
Yeah.
I would actually say that the values of my faith were integral to the position that I took on the HRO and to many of the folks at my church. So it wasn't that there was a divorce from our religious values that led us to support full inclusion and full legal rights for the LGBTQIA plus community. It was because of our faith that we felt compelled to go to the public square and to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every human being that is a resident of Jacksonville. They deserve the same legal rights, the same protections under the law. So that's the one thing that I would just slightly tweak there, that I think that the problem is that, particularly in this country over the past several decades, that kind of one side of the faith equation has kind of gotten all of the notoriety for positions in political matters, and as the conservative side, right? So what happened, and I don't want to go too far on this because I'm a preacher, I could preach all day, so you got to cut me off if I go too far. But in a nutshell,
Real quick though, thank you for clarifying that, because my perspective is that of someone who is more often than not hurt by the church. So I didn't mean it as let me clarify my statement, is that I didn't mean it as a negative thing. I meant it as a positive thing. And I think how my wording sounded jaded, and it was meant to sound complimentary.
Oh no, I didn't take it.
But our listeners, our viewers may have. So thank you for fixing.
Sure.
And please carry on with what you were about to say.
Sure. I was just going to note that I think that if you take a look at the history of our country and the role that religion has played in it, and when I say religion, let's be honest, the vast majority of people in this country for its history have been Christian of one stripe or another. But the role of Christianity then, as it is played out in mainstream politics, is interesting. And if you go back a few decades, you're looking at the 60s and 70s. And at that time, there's so much diversity within the church when it relates to both theology and politics. And so, both sides, and again, both sides is kind of limiting the conversation. There's more than two sides to a story even, but, both sides. So both sides would come into the public square to debate topics in politics, and maybe they'd bring their Bibles, maybe they wouldn't, but you understood early on that Christianity and faith more generally was diverse. There's a diversity of political positions under the umbrella term of faith. But then an interesting thing happened is that when you get into the 1980s, the right-wing Christians really started to organize around like Ronald Reagan and some other politics in this country. And so they went to the public square talking about their politics with Bible in hand, making it very clear that our faith is compelling us to take these positions. The liberal wing, the left wing, the progressive wing of the Christian church was still active in politics, But when they went to the public square, they made a strategic, conscious decision to leave their Bibles at home. So what I mean by that is when they were coming in to argue for their political points, they were arguing from a strategically and intentional secular position. They stopped bringing Jesus into the conversation. And I think a lot of us started thinking about this, a couple of decades later, and it's like, there was a reason people did that. And I also want to note, I just came up that what I'm talking about is primarily the white church, because that is not true of the black church. And because you saw Jesse Jackson and other folks that were very much bringing their faith in there. So I want to be clear that I was kind of centering whiteness there, and I want to avoid that. But the white Christian church in the 80s made that decision strategically to decouple their faith from their politics. But 20 years later, a lot of us are looking at each other saying, well, what was the effect of that? Well, the effect of it is that all these people then grow up in America thinking, oh, Jesus is a Republican. And it's like, God, we created a vacuum in the public square that was filled completely by the right wing. And what we're seeing now more and more, and the HRO in Jacksonville is a great example of this, more people that represent the left side of the political spectrum who are also Christians or people of faith are coming with their faith and saying, no, we're not going to allow you to monopolize Christianity. We're not going to allow you to monopolize Jesus. There are many sides to this, and we're coming back to the public square with our Bibles or with our faith, and we'll have a robust political, ethical, and religious conversation with anyone, with our values in tow.
I love that. I love that you kind of clarified or segued off of the white centrist church and mentioned the black centric or black church as well, because I think it's funny. We were talking about this past weekend at my mother's birthday. My sister in 1984, I think it was the first time that Jesse Jackson ran for president. We were sitting on the floor at my grandmother's house, and my sister heard Jesse Jackson speak. I think she may have been 6, which means I was 4 or 5. And my sister said, he should be president. And my mom was like, I don't think you fully understand what he's saying, but that's really amazing that you think he should be president. Okay, great. And that's kind of how we were always raised is, it doesn't really matter what the person looks like, or it doesn't really matter what the other people in the house might think. If that's, your views on politics and your views on religion are your views, and we were always encouraged to have our own views on that. But speaking of individual views and religious doctrine, I asked you in our show prep, how does one go from strict religious doctrine to open-minded liberal thinking? And you said step 1 was find a lesbian witch. And I'm paraphrasing your answer for the sake of humor. And I'm also going to bring in my dancing Jesus because I think that he is appropriate as well. Because a friend of mine who
very nice.
Yeah, who is he calls himself a closet Christian because sometimes he finds it easier to admit that he's a liberal and a supporter of gay rights than it is to admit that he's a Christian nowadays. He calls himself a closet Christian. He gave me that dancing Jesus for my dashboard. But in Florida, in the heat, if you put anything in your dashboard, it melts. So I didn't want Jesus to melt, so he stays on my desk. But he's next to my hula dancer, my hula dancing Aquaman, actually. Anyway, so tell us about your lesbian witch and how she formed your modern religious thinking. I was telling Mike about that, and he was fascinated as well. So I'm sure he will have some follow-up questions.
Yeah. So thanks for bringing that up, because so I obviously am serving a church, and my own personal faith at this point is very inclusive, very left-wing, if you will, very progressive. And as we had discussed earlier, Mike, I originated, in a very conservative, oppressively conservative religious environment growing up. So yeah, how I went from being essentially an evangelical / fundamentalist Christian to where I am now was a bit of a journey. And, when it all started, when we discussed this, I had mentioned the fact that I seem to have had like a lot of like kind of interesting, like mystical experiences when I was really little. One of the things that had happened, and I don't have a memory of this, but I was informed of this by my father. But apparently, like one day my dad came home and I was a pretty young kid, maybe 5 or 6, and I was just there on the front porch swing. And my dad came up and he just saw that I was crying. And he's like, "Why are you crying?" And apparently I told him, "Well, because God loves me." And like I said, I have no memory of that, but my dad told me about that story. And I think that what happened then is that I kind of came into my school, which was a private Christian school that had a very conservative theology behind it. And it was in a small town in Kansas, and the school was like a consolidated kindergarten through 12th grade kind of thing. And so, I came as this like open vessel, whereas like I knew that there's like some God out there. There's something that I've connected to that is beautiful and wonderful. And so I come with this eagerness to learn more about that. And immediately this kind of church school says, "Oh, well, that feeling you had, well, that was Jesus. And he's written a book, and here it is, right? Just read all of this." And it's kind of like when you become a Christian in that kind of a context, there's like a swag bag you get that has all this extra stuff that you didn't realize. It's like, okay, so not only do you have to be a Christian, but now you got to believe in the Trinity, and you got to believe that, Jesus is a Republican, and you've got to believe, all this other sort of stuff. And it's just all this baggage that kind of gets thrown in there. Well, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I'm a little kid. I don't know any better. So I grew up, in many ways, my spiritual formation is deeply influenced by this really conservative Christian school. So I just buy in. And that includes the more conservative views on the LGBTQIA community, which at that time, back in the 80s, we didn't have those letters, I don't think, or if those letters existed, not in that combination, or not that I even knew of in my context. But,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, say that again, Mike.
We were just the gay community or the queer community, and that was it.
Right. So
yeah.
So there's the gay community, and we, of course, in my context, there's like, well, they're sinners, they're going to hell. That's what I was taught, and it's not that I wanted to believe it, but I had this. I have this Jesus in my heart, and I'm a Christian, and the Bible that God wrote is telling me this. So I guess I have to believe it. So I did. Yeah, I bought into that at a very early age, and all the other stuff. So a big turning point in my life, as I started to kind of turn away from that conservative face of my Christianity to something else, happened when I was at college. And this is a story I know that happens to a lot of folks, but what happened at college is that a lot of things, but one thing in particular that I think is pretty important, I ended up doing a senior honors thesis under one of the faculty at the University of Kansas. And because I was a psych major, and so we were doing a research project on an idea I'd come up with. They paired me with her, kind of not quite randomly. It was her specialty, right? So I got connected to her. She agreed to take me under her wing, and I immediately started to get kind of nervous because I'm this small town Kansan kid, who came from this really deeply conservative Christian background, and she is just an out there lesbian. Right, which is maybe the first out there lesbian that I've ever met. I'm sure I met other lesbians, but I didn't know that they were lesbians, right? So she was like loud and proud, and my mind is being blown. Like, oh, you should be ashamed of that. Why are you telling everyone? But more than that, I also believe, based on just kind of observing her and her conversations, I'm pretty sure she was Wiccan too. Right. So I've got a Wiccan lesbian faculty advisor for my project. I'm working very intimately with her on this project for a year. And I'm just like, oh, my Christian mind is like, oh my God, like I'm in trouble. This is not good. To make a long story short, I worked under her for a year, and she was one of the most amazing, kind, compassionate, just beautiful human beings that I have ever met in my life. And part of the theology that I was given growing up in this really conservative environment is that the fruits of the Spirit, the fruits of the Holy Spirit, which are virtues such as the ones I just described, they can only really manifest themselves in someone that has the Holy Spirit of God indwelling them. Like that, like only Christians, real Christians, are supposed to be people like this. And I'm like, this woman is maybe the most Christ-like person I have ever met in my entire life, and she is a lesbian witch. So how does that make any sense? And so that was a big turning point in my spiritual formation, where I realized that we're all God's children, and the Spirit of God can indwell and exhibit itself in anyone and everyone.
I love that. I think
Yes, that's
so
that's
cool.
really fascinating.
Yeah.
If I could just touch on something, is that I find more people who are the most compassionate and Christ-like people are not the ones that are in church every Sunday, or describe themselves as Christians or evangelicals or whatever. And I almost, as soon as I hear conservative, I'm like, what are you conserving? Is my point. I have family that are staunch Republicans, and they don't go to church, and they're not them. I won't go down that road. But I ask, what are you conserving? And if you're such against liberals, and you believe, and some of them are very well versed in the Bible and theology and understand, but yet they don't have the empathy, the compassion, and want to help others as Jesus would. And if you look at what Jesus was, you would find him to be more liberal, and I don't like those terms. They're just so derogatory, and so I find that very interesting that this person was the one who kind of, uh, pushed you to, I'll say push, to expand your view. And I think it took a part of most of my lifetime, because of growing up in a non-denominational church, being baptized, and singing the hymnals and Jesus. I have a hard time as an adult with the term or the figure Jesus. I can deal or not deal. I when I think about someone that is, you know, I want to say above. It's just so to some it might be silly, but God, and all encompassing. Um, you know, that's more of who I think of than Jesus, and I think that's more of a universal, that then it allows everybody's thoughts to and perceptions of religion to be inclusive rather than just saying Jesus, because then you already exclude other beliefs. And if you don't mind, I just want to touch back on the HRO, because the evangelicals were bussed in to that HRO in Jacksonville. So whomever's watching that's outside of Jacksonville or didn't go, wasn't a part of. I was there, and I was I don't know, you guys attended the last council meeting, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So at the time, I didn't know you, Philip, and Mike. We must have missed each other, because I was sitting kind of down towards the front, and we had several ministers. You may have been sitting with them, and then the rabbi from the temple, Rabbi Leaf. And they had a consortium of religious figures on our side. Some that were a part of the gay churches in Jacksonville, and some that weren't, that were just allies. And as I walked in first before the event, a van pulled up from one of the evangelical churches that's on TV, and they were getting out, and they were just nasty. My perception. I don't want to paint. I'm painting a picture of my perception here, that they got out and they were just nasty people. We were, trying to help, with whatever needs that they needed to get into and they just and I'm like, okay. And I really didn't know who they were until we realized, they went on and sat. The council meeting room is like theater seating. It is the theater chairs. It's a very nice room, but it's divided with an aisle down the middle, theater sitting. And they had everybody who was for the HRO on the right side, and everybody who was against the HRO on the left side. And to start it off, you guys probably remember this because it was so impactful audibly. and they asked us to stand first, right? As we're supporting the HRO. Then they asked us to sit, and they said everybody against. And it was almost whoever put this together, because they forced us to sit that way, not mixed, right? So everybody on the left, when they stood up in unison, those theater seats slapping back was just a loud, I don't know if you guys remember that, loud audible sound. And it was like, it almost took my breath away, because I was like, really, that many people are so heavily against, this ordinance, and that was infuriating. And then I don't know if you guys remember the gentleman that walked up and talked about being molested in a bathroom. And now he came from one of the churches, specifically that evangelical church, and he worked for them as a caretaker of grounds or something like that. And he got up there and he talked about how he was molested in a bathroom, because the biggest concern was, the bathrooms and, transgender, and that was one of their big concerns, right? He talked about that, and then talked about how he did the same thing to other children. So admitting that he was a pedophile. I couldn't I was so angry by him saying that, painting us as the same as him. I know I'm going into the weeds, but there's a point to this. And when you got there, you signed in and you checked off if you wanted to speak. And I don't know why I did, because I hate public speaking. But soon after, I was called up and to speak, and I was so furious that I had enough in me to go up there and say, I'm a native of Jacksonville. I went to all these schools, and they varied from public schools to just other regular private school to Catholic private school, and then back to graduating from a public school. And just to show, that my roots were planted in Jacksonville. My parents had moved here in the late 60s. We were here to stay, and that you should listen to the people who are from here, not people who are bussed in here from some other area. They even had a preacher come in from Georgia to that protested it. It was just, and I spoke about what I experienced going through school, being teased and not even knowing if I was gay yet. And then what my nephew experienced just because of how he spoke. And he hasn't come out to this day if he is gay, not gay, I don't know. But it was such a heated and frustrating situation. And I am so glad that you brought it up, and that you were there, and that you participated, and that your church has been somewhat, from what I'm hearing from you, is somewhat not developed out of that, but pulls from that. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that correct?
Well, to clarify that real quick, the church
Okay.
we're at right now is not in any way affiliated with the UU church, but in terms of a lot of our theology and the way we look, there's a lot of overlap. If they were people, they'd be friends.
Right. But as far as supporting the HRO is what I'm saying.
Oh, the church at the time, the Unitarian Universalist Church. Oh,
No,
yeah, absolutely.
well,
Oh,
you
go ahead.
now too, right? Your now is very much in support of.
Oh, absolutely, 1000%. Yes,
Okay.
we're completely about affirming LGBTQIA folks and all marginalized peoples. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Yeah. So when you were talking about that, I just felt like I needed to express that experience, because it was just, a little traumatizing, but then a little bit of relief by being able to get up there and speak, and as well as other people who spoke more eloquently than me, of course. But to see that side, and just like you're talking about, and where it goes from politics. If you were to stand in that city council room, it's like a microcosm of the total of this country. The even though we were sitting on the right side, the left is, non-faith based supposedly, and then the right being, totally faith based and having, church as the best interest, and that's just not really how it is.
That
And we
was
have,
if
go
you
ahead.
think if you think about
No,
that,
no,
the way the city council was seated, it was opposite. So facing the city council,
facing them,
we were on
yes,
the
it
left,
was, yes,
and the religious conservatives were on the right.
exactly,
That was deliberate, I believe.
yeah,
They seated us so that if you were
so that they could keep in their minds who people were.
right,
Is that what you're saying?
left based on where they were seated, and the way that that table is cut, it's kind of that think of, like, for people who don't know the room, it looks kind of like the United Nations in that half circle, not even a half circle, like a half crescent,
Hmm.
a third of a circle, I guess, table, and it's got that kind of curve to it. So everyone on the left is seated is in favor of the HRO, very liberal, and everyone on the right is very conservative and against it. And that's how they seated it. So, and you could see the people who voted for it were, on the council were also seated that way. So it was very much theatrics, and your observation of it being theatrical seating is accurate as well. I think that's also important. It's a council chamber in the traditional sense of, like, the United States Congress, but it feels and is deliberately, I think, meant to feel like theatrical seating. It's the theater of politics, which is unfortunate that that's how our politics have become.
Yeah.
But the reason I laughed, I do want to clarify for anyone who watches this and thinks, because I did not realize you were going to go there with the guy with the bathroom issue. I laughed when
Sorry.
no, I laughed when you brought him up, because I always laugh when someone brings him up, because he's the guy I went toe to toe with at the, not that meeting, with the previous meeting, and ended up on the front page of the newspaper. Because it's me doing this. It's a picture of me, pointing and yelling and standing, and the local paper put me on the front page, and it says city council meeting gets heated. Standing. I'm the only person standing. Everyone else is seated. Me and, like, a bunch of heads at, like, my chest level, because everyone else is seated, and I'm standing, and I'm pointing, I'm yelling, because this guy stands up in the middle, completely out of turn. It was one of the previous meetings at FSCJ, or the community college at the time. And stands up and just starts talking, and he's misquoting, and probably some of the quotes were accurate, but he was misconstruing Bible quotes about how being gay is a sin, and homosexuality is a sin, and sodomy, and all the things he could pull out that were misconstrued or misquoted or completely fabricated. And I stood up and I was like, yeah, but I wasn't being mean. I was just being loud. I was just trying to drown him. And Will Conroy took a picture of me and put it on the front page right under the headline that said city council HRO meeting gets heated. And I'm like, well, yeah. I'll own that. And that was my Facebook profile picture for probably a year. And my mom got framed. So so whenever you mention him, I'm like, yeah, I'll laugh about him. But yeah, you're right, though. He tried to paint us in the worst possible picture. So
yeah. Well, I would imagine, even if people didn't think that it got heated, it did get heated.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take too much time away from Phillip talking about the church, but just to touch on that a little bit, I know a lot. I mean, I felt heated and just didn't express it, and I think a lot of people, did, because they were just doing it out of decorum and more out of just shock, So.
Yeah, if I could add some of my own observations to that
Please.
too,
Yeah.
which I really appreciate hearing y'all's perspective on that. And I want to say, for anyone who may be watching this show who either isn't from Jacksonville or wasn't a part of the HRO fight, first of all, a little bit of history. When the HRO finally passed in, was it 2017? I forget the year now.
Yeah.
Okay, 2017.
That was
That was the
but it-
second time it had come up before the
Yes.
Jackson City Council. A couple of years prior, it had gone up, and I like that's a great background. It had come up, and it had failed. And it was a huge black eye for the city, because at that point, then I think we were the largest city in America to affirmatively vote down an attempt to give full legal protection to the LGBTQ community. And so part of the reason why it crashed and burned, there's several, and I won't get into all the local politics that were involved in it. There were some city council folks that had affirmed that they were going to vote for it, and then kind of betrayed the cause at the last second. I won't get into all that. But one of the things that happened, as I think you had mentioned, Mike, is there was all of this kind of conservative Christian organization against it that had come up and had really pushed and leaned on the city council to vote that thing down. So when it came back up, I know that those of us that were in support of it realized that we needed to have a voice of faith to counter the hateful voice of faith that had helped to sink it the first time around. We had to make it clear that the religious, side is not anti-gay. We had to make that clear. So that was why, I was proud to be a part of that clergy group that was able to give that counter message. And I want to note that, like you were saying, Mike, about some of the comments that were being spewed from that microphone, and larger than that in the media throughout Jacksonville around this vote, it was vile. It was hateful. It was vile. It was ugly, ugly bigotry. And I have so much respect and admiration, and I just stand in awe of people that are, like y'all, that are in the LGBTQ community, who had to suffer that, but to do so in a way to be able to take that and then to counter that, whether that's with passion, Mike, like you were saying. I love the fact that I've seen that picture where you're kind of like that. And because that is what's necessary. Like, there's so many different responses to that kind of hate and ignorance, and all of them were necessary for, I think, the rest of the city and really, the rest of America, as so many people are struggling to be more accepting of LGBTQ folks. It was all necessary to kind of help pull back the veil so we could kind of see our own ugliness, look at it in the mirror, and then confront it head on and ultimately defeat it. We haven't ultimately defeated all of it, of course, but at least here in Jacksonville, the HRO passage was a huge win. It was a huge win. And when I was listening to some of the stuff that was being spewed into that microphone, my heart was breaking for the LGBTQ folks, because I was just like, oh my gosh, this is, I can't even imagine what that must have been like to have to listen to that. Because if you're there, I mean, y'all talked about it, if you're there to speak, to promote it, to try to get it passed, because you've got to be a part of the political process to get it across the finish line, and then to have to suffer having to listen to that crap. I can't even imagine how painful that was.
Well, and that's a great observation. What I can say on my behalf is that while some things were shocking, what people said, and especially what he said, and the attitudes that people took on, and before I get to the point of the end point, it was Mac Brunson, the pastor of First Baptist Church, who held a lot of power. First Baptist Church is very large in Jacksonville, downtown especially, and they've held a lot of power, I think, forever, and it's started to been whittled away, right? And Mac Brunson wasn't the original pastor, and there was some not loyalty, but gosh, I'm not thinking of the right word. For the previous and original, was Homer Limsey the original, or just a previous?
He was the one that was there the longest. I don't know that he was the original. Yeah.
Right. And a lot of people liked him, wherever you were on political spectrum, wherever you were on religious spectrum, they liked him because he was, even though he was conservative, he was very welcoming, engaging, and that sort of thing. They still held a lot of power. But when Mac Brunson was in there, and I feel a little entitled to say this because he lived in our neighborhood, a gated neighborhood, which I had to drive by his house on a daily basis, of which was built by a local developer. He got it hands free and then turned around and sold it and, hauled butt after the HRO. And that's a little infuriating, somebody who is just given everything on a silver platter and then come in there to do political work and then stands before the people on a television screen and tells them how they should live their life and where they're going at in the afterlife or whatever. And I went up to him at before the HR meeting started and introduced myself and said, I live around the corner from you. And this was before he identified, that I was on the other side. And I said, I would love the opportunity to speak to you more. But once he realized I was on the other side, he wanted to have nothing to do with that. So maybe I've gotten into the weeds to get to that point that I was going to get to, but yeah. Oh, it was hard to hear, and like I said, that one gentleman just fired me up, to get up there and speak on myself, any family members that have had that same experiences, and my friends too. But because we have, and I'll lump us again back together, the LGBTQ community of have experienced this all of our lives. Typically, it wasn't anything new. It was hard to hear and painful and infuriating, and especially when people are saying it, to you, at you, in a space, where you're confined to. But when you live your life, you think it's, over there and I can maneuver my way through Jacksonville and not have to deal with it. But it was, totally confronted there. And yeah.
Yeah. I would like to move on to a lighter subject, but first I would like to thank the part of our acronym that I don't think gets enough credit, especially in our public fights. We are very quick to mention the gay and queer umbrella because it's easy. The LGBTQIA, the TQIA doesn't get enough credit. If it weren't for the TQIA, we wouldn't have had Stonewall, and we wouldn't have had a lot of the movements that we've had over the years, because it's the TQIA that doesn't suffer fools gladly on our behalf.
Right.
They get pissed off faster, and they'll throw the bottles and they'll throw the rocks. And
they'll jump in the fight first.
Yeah, because they are so marginalized, they get pissed off faster, and their fuse is shorter, and they will drag the rest of us, pun sometimes intended. They will drag the rest of us screaming into the fray with them and say, "Hey, you guys, we've been waiting too fucking long for this, and we've been waiting, and you guys have been, waiting with us. But come on, let's fight." So thank you to anyone in the marginalized part of our marginalized part.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Because we wouldn't be able to be who we are right now without those people that fit under those, especially the transgender and Stonewall. I mean, yeah.
And also thank you, Philip, and the people in the religious community who have broken ties, or not ties, broken. I'm not sure what the word is. Broken.
Or just been true to the Christian, what a Christian should be. If you want to be Christ-like, you're gonna be open to everybody, and that's being an ally. That's being, not just to our group of our community, but to everyone, and expressing, acceptance.
Yeah, thank you. What I should have said is thank you, not for breaking ties, breaking tradition is what I should say, with the more conservative wing of the religious dogmatic conservatives who said, don't do this, don't be like that, and you and your branch of the flock saying, hey, wait a minute, it's more Christ-like to be embracing and encompassing than it is to be divisive. So thank you for
absolutely. And I appreciate the way you framed that, because I really do think, as you kind of have articulated, both of you, that well, first of all, it's long overdue that the church has taken its rightful place at the side in solidarity with the marginalized. But when I go and I look in my Bible and I take a look at the life of Jesus, I see someone that absolutely was always allied with the marginalized, the people that had been disempowered by the elite and the powerful and the powers that be. And so in our day and age here in America, the LGBTQIA community is obviously still a very marginalized community that has been disempowered by the cishet kind of patriarchy that we have existing here in this country. And I think that absolutely Jesus would be behind this. And so the church is just doing, I think, what's been long overdue. And related to that, one thing that I'd also like to lift up, which isn't to lift up something I did personally, but it's more what I think is really important as it kind of relates to some of this conversation we're having. One honor that I received, I think about a year or so ago, is that I was asked to deliver an invocation at Jacksonville's official AIDS Day observation in December. And it's interesting because at that time I had just gotten away from the Unitarian Universalist Church. I left my previous church and had not yet kind of founded the People's Church of Jacksonville. So I'm kind of a man without a church. I'm a preacher without a flock, whatever you want to call it. But I was asked to deliver that invocation. And so a question I kind of had was, I've always been kind of culturally Christian. Because Unitarian Universalism, where it relates to Christianity, is kind of a fuzzy area. So I won't get into the weeds on that. But I had to ask myself, when I give this invocation for this AIDS Day prayer at City Hall, am I going as a Unitarian Universalist? Do I have that hat on, or do I put my Christian hat back on? And I made the decision to put the Christian hat on. So I prayed and it was inclusive, it was welcoming of all faiths, but from the perspective of the Christian faith, which is very authentic to me. It's what I grew up in and what I still self-identify as. And from that Christian perspective, I was able in that invocation to make a prayer and a petition of forgiveness for the church's role in the way that AIDS was handled, HIV and AIDS was handled in this country in the early 1980s, which is just sinful. The way that the church acted in conjunction with the Reagan administration killed people with AIDS. Obviously, that was at that time very much centered in the gay community, and it was absolutely horrid. And there's no excuse for it. So one thing that I was able to do with my Christian hat on was to be able to speak as a Christian minister and to say, we must humbly repent of this and apologize for this and own the role that the Christian church played in this atrocity.
Well,
I think that's fantastic.
I think that is fantastic. And I don't know, I know you didn't know this, but you have actually segued perfectly into what I want to talk about next, which, believe it or not, based on that, is not going to sound like it, but it's very lighthearted. So there is, and I want to be cognizant of the time, Philip. If you need to go, please feel free to check out. But I hope you can stick with us for a little bit longer. We've already gone over time. This is our next topic. Can't see the full picture because the top of it cuts off. This is I'm going to move out of the way a little bit. This is
you're fine because we got the best part of it.
Yeah.
In Germany, the top of the campaign, you can't see the this side of it. The top of the slogan here is "Mask on." It translates "Mask on to save lives," and similar campaigns say "Mask on to keep the lights from going out," which in German actually means "Mask on to stay alive." It doesn't mean keep the lights from going out like your power, but it could mean that as well.
Yourself
from going out. But it is a German campaign, and I think a German woman, any old lady giving the finger is funny. But
just the finger alone.
The German woman with her floral, very Pulitzer mask, but her little middle finger going up is hilarious. It's not a public service announcement to other Germans. It's a public service announcement to the United States.
Wow.
Because you were talking about the Reagan administration and the way they handled the AIDS pandemic. This is deliberately at the United States and how we are, I have to say we, because it's our government, how we are handling the COVID pandemic. And these are now inspiring posters and PSAs all over Europe. It started in Berlin specifically, but they're spreading all over, pun intended, all over Europe, aimed at the United States. I think it's great. So Berlin gives middle finger to anti-maskers is what the headline said, and they literally are. I think this is great. I think we need to have campaigns like this all over the world. Especially here in the U.S.
I just had a thought, Mike. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, great! I want feedback on this.
This could be the new ice challenge. You know, the ice bucket challenge. You know, everybody do their pick,
find it,
and then have the type. Yeah.
I'm horrible doing this.
I think we should. I think we should get it going. I mean, clearly they got it going, but let's just
Absolutely.
encourage people to do their own picture and then add in their we can create a type that everybody can do their fill in or
well, I've seen everyone's got pictures of like an infant, like their very first picture of like a newborn that's just like minutes old, and they've all thought like, oh look, my baby's giving the finger, or like an ultrasound and it's like, oh, clearly they're not cognizant of that. But I think it's hilarious, like even do that kind of picture, but it's anti-maskers, it's middle finger to anti-maskers ad campaign. But I think that's great. So this old woman in Germany, I wish I had her name to give her proper credit. But yeah, she's basically telling Trump, which I think is wonderful. And that I love her. Like I want to make her. She's my Christmas card this year. If that better won't be by Christmas, I think I'm going to make her my digital Christmas card, at least my. But yeah, I want my mom. My mom just turned 80. She's going to do this. I'm going to get her to do this campaign. But yeah, so I love that you guys immediately embraced that. I didn't get any. I thought I'd get at least some resistance to this, but you both were like, yeah, absolutely. Actually segues to the next story is a New York in Suffolk County, a New York Sweet 16 party. 50 people attended and 37 left with COVID. Why are people like? I keep saying this to people. No event is worth infecting your friends and family. I don't care if it's your Sweet 16, I don't care if it's your graduation, I don't care if it's Thanksgiving, I don't care if it's Christmas dinner. We have been told for almost a year now, more than 5 people without masks in an enclosed space is not safe. Now we're being told not only is it more airborne than we realized, you can catch it in less than 15 minutes from somebody who's positive.
Yeah.
The chances of someone being asymptomatic are higher than we realize. Now they're saying if it's, they were saying 10 people and 6 feet. Now they're saying it's 5 people is too many. And it's actually 30 feet is actually considered I just kicked my desk. I moved the whole, sorry. I was trying to scratch my leg and I ended up kicking my whole desk and like knocked a bunch of things over. So.
Looked like your chair had shocks on it or something.
I'm very mad at my media. But they're saying now 30 feet is not even enough if somebody is highly symptomatic, and you don't know. We're in Florida. If you're like me, you've got seasonal allergies year round. Every season has seasonal allergies.
Yeah.
A friend of mine posted on Facebook, she said, I get to play that game. Is it the flu or is it COVID? I'm thinking the flu. Every time the weather changes, I get a new allergy. So I'm wearing a mask year round until, forever probably.
Well, if I can jump in, I think I love the people that have embraced masks as an accessory.
Oh yeah, I've got like 20.
Just to stay protected, but might make it fun. But and I think that's the best attitude to take until we even if you're an anti-masker, just have fun with it until we know how to get through it. And if here's the thing though, and this is going to sound a little controversial.
That's why we're
with
here.
family, huh?
That's why we're here. Be
I
controversial.
know, right?
I wanted Jesus an hour ago.
Well, it's difficult to be around. For example, my mom moving over to my sister's house. She's got two that are in their 20s and one that's a teenager. And they still go out and work and do what they have to do. And then they're, back at the house a lot of the time. So my biggest concern was my mom going over there and being 77 years old and having underlying conditions that would affect her. I've got her on a pretty good vitamin regimen that I think will, help, but you just don't know. And if I go over there and I want to see my mom, or if I get her to come over here and stay the night or whatever, so that she can have some life. We wear masks when we go out, but just like you were talking about, the small groups of family can affect each other, and that concerns me. But what do you do about it? And now the party situation that you described, I think even if that was the one that was publicized on the news, and then they were showing how it just spreads, they were showing the I don't know how much contact tracing they were able to do, from that. But it's just going to spread like wildfire, and that takes me into the weeds of, with HIV testing. This is what I don't understand. You have infectious disease doctors that are heavily involved in COVID. So we already have protocols set up with HIV in testing and quick tests and confirmatory tests. And then when people are tested positive, then you tell them everybody you've been in contact with. Now that's sexually. So I can see where there's a little more difficulty when you're talking about who you've just been around socially. But still, you can come up with that if you've been cognizant of, where you've been. Besides the grocery store, you're not going to list off those people. But if you've been out, with family or friends, parties, whatever. But they're saying, that they're unable to do that. It kind of blows my mind, because if you already have a protocol set up for HIV, and why can't you adopt, or why isn't it? And I think some of the scientists have, and the infectious disease doctors have tried to do that. And I think some of the people that say government has had a hand in it not being successful. So help me out there with that.
I think there's a stigma that the rest of our country is facing. They've never had to face before. We in the queer community are used to, and I will also say, you and I, Mike, and Philip, I don't want to make any assumptions for you or your loved ones, but Mike, you and I also have the stigma of mental health disorders. We come from two fronts of stigmas in our life. We are used to being stigmatized, right? Where we can say, mental health disorders, being gay, we are used to having this other, being treated as other. The rest of our country, people of privilege are saying, I don't want to be ostracized. I don't want to be stigmatized. I don't want to admit that I've done something that others see as wrong, or others see as not okay. So they will twist the truth, or flat out lie, or deny to save face, or just absolutely say, I'm not going to answer the question. When they're part of a contact tracing situation, And I'm not saying everybody does that, but I think the vast majority of people are, because if you go back to the early days of the AIDS pandemic, before people even knew what to call it, before we could even agree on a name, it was still
Right.
the gay community. People were afraid to talk about who they'd been around and who they'd been with, because we didn't know how it was transmitted. So now, if you talk, I mean, I was talking to a family member, and you know, she said, well, we went to an Oktoberfest because someone in the family wanted to drink beer at an authentic Oktoberfest. And I said, well, first of all, A, you're not going to find an authentic Oktoberfest in Jacksonville. B, is it worth exposing yourself? You can't drink a beer with a mask on. Why are you going? You know, so that's ridiculous. C, now you're sitting in a room with me 5 feet away because your room isn't big enough for us to be 10 feet away, and I'm wearing a mask and you're not. How do I know you didn't get exposed to somebody, or 10 somebodies, or 1,000 somebodies at this Oktoberfest you had to go to that I didn't know you were at until after I'm in the room with you?
Yeah.
And my little homemade mask probably isn't effective enough. At least it's something, though.
Right.
And I feel like I should be spraying Lysol while I'm talking to you, just in case that's enough of a barrier, you know, like at least wear gloves while we're talking, something. You make me, you know, theater of the mind, to make me feel better.
You know, it's interesting as you talk about this, because it's making me, I'm asking a question, and I'm sure there's probably data on this somewhere, but I wonder if, particularly with folks that are a little bit older in the gay community, who remember the 80s and remember everything that happened with the AIDS pandemic, if those folks are more likely to wear masks and observe safety protocols than the regular population, not regular, but, you know, the general population, because of that understanding. Do y'all have any thoughts on that?
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I think it depends, because I know people who are like, well, I survived the AIDS pandemic. I don't, you know, screw this. I don't need the damn mask. And I also who say, well, I get the flu shot every year and I still get the flu. So I don't need a mask either. You know, it depends. I know people who are, I have severe OCD that I'm medicated for. And I know people who say, I've been preparing for this pandemic my entire life. I'm such a germaphobe. I wear gloves and masks all the time when I leave the house anyway. So I've people on every possible extreme of end of the extreme. So I think it just depends on the individual, but it's specific to the AIDS pandemic. I think it's as unique as the individual. I don't know what you think, Mike. But.
It's funny you bring that up, because I also was thinking it would be interesting for somebody to do the research and compare the two and show what the feeling was like, initially, the paranoia, the scared, am I going to die, the people that died. And then when is this going to end? Why is it affecting us? Because in comparison, it is somewhat similar in the sense that there's to my uneducated layman, mind, with it affecting people of color at higher rates. There must be some sort of gene or something, that they haven't really either told or discussed or something. Not to say that, people who are white are not getting it, but I'm just saying that they have put out statistics that that the people of color, I'm losing my thought.
It's also resources, though. It is.
That?
It's also resources, and it's also available. It's availability of resources, and it's also availability of education provided. Not education as far as intellect, but education as far as what's provided. There's an area of Washington, D.C. that is it's overwhelmingly people of color, but it's also a high income area. It's doctors and lawyers, and they're also like 18% of the population is testing positive for COVID. So they're well-educated people, but the resources in that population are slim, and they're given poor information on how to treat the COVID when they get it. So it's misinformation they're given. It's almost as if not to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's almost like,
Intentional.
yeah, the people giving them the information are saying, well, yeah, here's
You'll
the,
be okay.
like, oh, you got COVID, here's some bleach injected.
Well, yeah, but yeah, and you're hitting on something there that I think is really interesting. And it's interesting how we kind of organically came into this conversation, bringing in the AIDS pandemic as kind of an analog, but the government response to COVID in a lot of ways tracks with what was going on with AIDS, where there was a knowledge of what was going on. There's a suppression of information. There is this idea that, oh, this is only affecting people that this administration doesn't really care about anyway. So what's the rush? It's
the same with
self-cleaning
Reagan
oven.
in the 80s.
I hate to say it, self-cleaning oven. That was the idea, is just let it do what it's going to do, right? And when COVID hit, I have to say this because I'm just still, it boggles my mind to think how public health has become so politicized, which it shouldn't. If anything should transcend politics and partisanship, it should be public health, but no, it is deeply politicized, deeply partisan. And when COVID first hit, my thought was, is that Fauci?
Fauci.
Nice. When COVID first hit, my thought was, okay, here's what America's going to do. We've got the resources to tackle this head on. We're going to tell everyone to stay home. We're going to have universal basic income checks coming to everyone. We're going to accelerate robots going into the workplace. We're going to make drones from Amazon come. They're going to get subsidized by the government to give us all of our foods and necessities at our doorstep so we don't have to go out. I had it all scoped out, like how we're going to do this to save America. And none of that happened. And I'm just like, we have the resources to really to weather this. We can do this, and none of it happened. And I'm still to this day that I understand politically why it's expedient for, frankly, the Republican Party and for rich people and for companies and corporations to want to keep the economy running and pretend that nothing's happening. But it hurts my heart to think that we're going to sacrifice the elderly, the poor, people of color at the altar of capitalism for this disease. It hurts my heart.
New Zealand did it, and New Zealand fought back the pandemic. They fought it off. They held it at bay with half the resources and much less money, in a smaller population, but still, they did it. They looked at the rest of the world and went, well, we can't do what they did. We can't do what they did. They fucked it up. We can't do what they did.
Right.
They learned before it got to their shores and said, okay, we know what not to do. Let's make a plan based on what not to do. And then they learned what to do. Then when it came to them, they were prepared. And then when it crept up again, they went, okay, here it is, knock it down. And then it came out again and they went, okay, it's back. And then it came out again and they went, okay, it's back. And they've done that successfully. They're at sporting events. They're at concerts. They have a full parliament in action now. They're not working via Zoom or Skype. They're in people's homes. They're having holidays. And 4% of their population is sick. They've had like 1,000 cases where we've had 280,000 cases last count.
Not just cases, deaths. That's the death count.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's millions of count.
It's like you said, it's heartbreaking. It's not. I don't know.
What's interesting to do an analogy there is we're like, the United States is like the older sibling, right? Who's doing all the bad stuff, and you've got maybe a couple of siblings under them, and the second one doesn't do as bad, but is watching. And just because I'm the baby of family, this is the analogy, because I watched my brother and sister do the big mistakes. And by the time my parents got to me, they were like, whatever. But I was a good kid, I wanted to show my mom and dad that I'm not going to be like them. So, I mean, that's like New Zealand's looking at the United States going, yeah, you're fucking up over there real bad. So I think we're just going to, do our own way, the right way.
I have to show a picture of New Zealand just to say how beautiful they're handling this. They are doing such a beautiful job. Okay, and then in the most 2020 story so far, this is could there be a more 2020 representation?
Yeah, what?
It's
happening.
Zamboni on fire.
What is it?
It's a Zamboni. It's meant to clean ice in a environment, and it caught on fire. And the guy, he jumped out. He's fine. There he is. He's
Just
fine.
walks away.
He just said fuck it and walked away. And
the ice will put it out, right?
It went around the ice for 20 minutes in random circles and patterns, and it
didn't.
melted the ice behind it as it drove. And the video on YouTube, you can see it, and it left this red charred. I don't even know how. Like, I guess because it's not. I guess just below the surface of the ice is not real ice. It's like a plastic
hard surface.
Well, it's like ice, and then it's like real ice, and then like a thermal surface.
Yeah, probably like the ice packs or something.
Right.
I'm guessing, but because
so it's like real ice, and then like fake ice, and then like that blue. Apparently, I heard somebody explain it on one of the news channels. It's like that blue stuff they put in diapers. That's like a thermal layer, really easily. And then below that is like piping to keep everything. So it burned and melted all the way down to that blue stuff, which apparently smells like melted plastic. They had to evacuate the whole arena. Not that there was more than just the players and like a few key staff there because of COVID. But it basically melted the whole rink. It's going to cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably maybe even millions, to fix everything. But they don't even know why. It was a wiring issue. It's not even an old Zamboni. I say Zamboni. It may be an ice cleaner. It may not be an actual Zamboni trademark name, but it just drove around in random patterns. Somebody, of course, put it to music. They auto-tuned it. It's really funny. It's the most thing. Like,
put the link up for sure.
Yeah,
I'll put it on our show page. I just thought it was hilarious. We don't write the video, so I couldn't put it in our show, but I'll put it on the.
No, just to verify that's in the United States, right?
Yes, it's in the. Of course.
Of course
it is. I mean, you would think, maybe Canada, because, hockey is so popular up there and everything. Of course, Canada didn't do something stupid like that.
It's like St. Louis or Cincinnati or something. It's like, I don't know sports, but it's a thing. It's definitely, I was like, wait, what? This happened? Of course it did. Of course, as
us living in Florida, we're like, ice rinks? Where?
Something involving ice caught on fire. That is so 2020. Like, how else would that happen? And then
I have a question. If when it becomes 2021, will all of this stop? And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about this the things that happen like every month. You have the bingo card, right? You're wondering what's next on the bingo card. And are we going into the next year with that same? Are we gonna, or is that gonna be our new normal, just like the Zooms?
Oh God, I hope
all
not.
that.
The
flying monkeys and the murder hornets and.
One show.
I think we're in the Wizard of Oz this year or something.
Flying monkey too. I had my
that one's clearly not scary enough.
No. Yeah. No, I think it goes back to everything being blamed on Florida Man, the way it used to be.
On what?
A Florida Man.
What's that?
You don't remember the Florida Man? Before
I'm showing my ignorance, so I'm gonna look back.
It was Florida, caught doing this. Florida Man caught doing that. Man in Florida did.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, anytime anything dumb happens, it's somebody in Florida.
Right. So now
it's just
goes back to that. I think there was a comic that was the New Yorker had a contest. They do it every few months online, and then they pick the best one for their print magazine at the end of the year. And they've had so many submissions this year. They'll probably end up doing like a whole issue or just like a whole sub website, dedicated to it. And it was like, pick the caption for this. And it was a man and his son in the elevator, or a man and child in the elevator. And the two that are getting the most votes so far, one was the kid asking the dad, traditionally elevators don't, or buildings don't have a 13th floor, right? So the two that are winning captions of it's just a kid and a man in an elevator. One caption was, Dad, how come buildings don't have a 45th floor? And the caption said the year 2027. So obviously, like in the future, we've decided that 45 being the current president,
Oh,
no longer has.
I'm trying to think what 45 is related to. See,
Right.
I've already forgotten about him.
The other one that's you see, and that came on. Apparently, that caption was placed earlier in the year, but now they're saying the caption,
The 20th floor should be removed.
20th floor is the one that's now passed it as like now they're like neck and neck as the two winning captions. So yeah,
I have seen the meme where it's like 13 what's the other the numbers like 666 or whatever numbers are
verboten. Yeah,
horrible or whatever, and now 2020's got nothing on them.
Yeah, it was the
2020.
if they did a remake of The Omen, Damien would have 2020 on his head. Yeah, it was funny. So, okay, well, one last question for you, Philip. And it was one that Mike and I were debating who was going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you since I did the research. I finally looked it up. I told you I was going to. In 1992 is when Andrew Lloyd Webber did his revival of Jesus Christ Superstar. And I thought of you for this because you talked about, you're a content creator and your church is online. If Jesus came back now, and as Jesus Christ Superstar, the musical, tells the version of using mass communication to reach the people, do you think he'd be using social media? In the last, revival of the play, Lloyd Webber had Jesus using television. In the original movie and the original Broadway cast, he was using newspapers and radio. And some TV, but in the 1992 version, he was using an online presence. But of course, there was no social media back then. Do you think Jesus would be using Facebook and TikTok and Instagram? And
that's a great question. And first of all, I want to note that I'm a huge Jesus Christ Superstar fan. My family actually watches it every Good Friday. Like that's our traditional Easter show to watch. I love it.
Then before you answer the question, I want to ask, are Ted Neely or John Legend?
Ted Neely. So the John Legend, I have great respect for him, but Ted Neely's my Jesus. I mean, I can't get away from it. And I forget who played Judas. But yeah, just they're an amazing cast. And so, that has probably been the most influential portrayal of Jesus, in movies or TV or whatever, for me personally. Like when I think of Jesus, there's so much that I think about Andrew Lloyd Webber and Ted Neely creating that depiction. So to answer your question, I think yes. I think that if Jesus were here today, Jesus, when he was here 2,000 years ago, what I see as being his primary ministry is to prep people for the kingdom of God, and to basically, we have to understand, to contextualize him. And I won't go too long on this. I could talk on this for days, but we want to make sure that we understand Jesus's context. He is a brown-skinned Palestinian Jew living under the imperial Roman Empire's power, under the thumb of Rome. And the Jewish people had been oppressed for 400 years up to this point, and prior to that, another 400 years. So Jesus is coming to talk to oppressed people at the margins, to give them a good word, to help them to survive all of that, and not lose their soul, to be able to resist the forces of colonization and empire and power without losing your soul. I think that's his primary message. So because Jesus has a heart for people, and particularly the marginalized, he's wanting to get his message out to the people who need it. That's not the elite. That's not rich folks. That's not old folks. That's another thing, is that there's so much power concentrated in older folks here in this country right now. When you take a look at who's running for president, who's on the Senate, Jesus is probably going to be on TikTok. He's going to be trying to get to Gen Z, people like my children's age. He's going to be doing I don't know what all he's going to be doing, but I absolutely believe that he's going to be trying to get his message to the people not to the elites, not to the powerful. So he will be doing that through all of the social media. Yeah, totally. Jesus would probably be a social media influencer if he were here today.
So he would do Jesus stuff.
I like that.
Yeah. Cool. I like that too. So then I have to ask, Dudley Moore's Holy Moses, would that be on your list as well?
Oh, actually, I've not seen that. No.
Really? Oh, that was.
No.
It's definitely. It definitely is a parental advisory movie. It's
Okay.
it's a little risque, but it's WHOLLY, Holy Moses. It's from I think 82 maybe. Yeah, 1980.
With Dudley Moore.
Yeah, Dudley Moore. Yeah.
Yeah, anything with Dudley Moore has a parental advisory.
It may have been. I think Jacqueline Bisset was in it with him. I think that's who the female lead was. So it was definitely. Definitely had some risque scenes. Yeah, but it was funny. It was definitely Dudley Moore, post Arthur, definitely Bo Derek 10 kind of humor. So yeah, don't watch it with your kids until you've previewed it yourself. Although by today's standards, it's probably pretty tame. I just remember it was
and most kids have seen a lot. Yeah, probably.
I've seen worse at school, but at the time it was considered risque. All right. Well, that is actually all I had. Mike, would you have any questions for our guest of honor today? Any follow up?
Philip, you brought up some interesting things that I think I'm going to ask you more on a personal level, and I look forward to the link to your church and watching. And like I said, I did go to the website, so I'm going to go back and really look. I'm really impressed. I really am, because, living in Jacksonville, I've been to, the church that we went to on a weekly basis and grew up in. But then after that, I was involved in being a charter member of a church, a gay church. Then when I lived in Miami, I went to Unity on the Bay, which I love, and they're doing an online thing that I watch. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to yours because I like how you're coming across. You got a great vibe, and I think your message would really appeal to me. So looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And, we'd love to have you. And definitely it's peopleschurchjacks.org. And for anybody who, I don't know when this is going to publish or whatever, but this evening we're going to be doing a prayer and communion service. So we're doing a prayer and communion service this evening at 7 p.m. You can find the link on our website and also our on Facebook and all that good stuff. You can look us up on Facebook. We do a lot of posting on there as well. So we're only a few months old, so we're still kind of building the plane as we fly it. But we're having a lot of fun doing it.
That's I love that analogy, building the plane as we fly it. I'm going to post, this will be up probably within the hour. So, check back on our page and put those links in as comments, and I'll make sure that we share them wide. One more question for you, Philip, because we didn't get a chance to play 100 questions, but I do want to ask, because you and I talked about this, and Mike doesn't know because it's a surprise to him. How do you describe cake without using the word moist? So
he knows that's one of my hated words.
Yeah.
Partner and Philip's life partner both hate the word moist, but it's, how do you describe certain foods and wonderful things in the world with that word? Because like inquiring minds, it's such a great word.
It is, like, you can't say like that it was a damp cake. Like no one.
No.
That sounds gross.
Cake might be the only exception.
Okay.
Certain things, I get it. Like the towel was moist. Someone left their socks on the floor and they were moist. That's gross. Why were the socks moist? I want to know. But the cake should be moist.
Yes. I think that's like the only.
Could you call it dewy?
What is it?
I said, could you say it's dewy?
I'm not sure about that one either. not for cake. Especially if it's chocolate, that would just be really weird.
So Philip, how would your wife describe a cake that was moist without using the word moist?
I think she would have to bite the bullet and would just have to go with moist, because how would you, it's interesting, like you bring that up. So we had some birthday cake yesterday. It was the Publix raspberry elegance cake, which is my all-time favorite cake. And it is so moist. Like I'm just thinking in my head, like it's a beautifully moist cake, and I don't know how to do it. I think you just have to call it moist.
Yeah, I think that word in particular fits just cake.
Only cake, though. There's no other
Cake.
thing.
What
to
about
be
a
moist?
sponge, or like something that should be moist, like a dish sponge?
There's other words.
Okay, I guess you could.
Because a moist sponge would be filled with bacteria. Like I don't like using sponges.
Okay, I don't either. But like, if you have instructions for something, like, okay, if you're making a pie crust from scratch, and it'll say moisten the edges of the pie crust. It always says that. It doesn't say dampen them. It doesn't.
But okay, so I'll broaden out the term, and I'll let Philip expand a little bit, and not to keep him, but moist can be kept to food.
Okay.
But I know people who are like, they're adamant moist is so gross to them that you really don't want to describe food.
But
Yeah,
I
I don't know.
moist is on the front of a Betty Crocker cake.
Yeah, moist and delicious, whatever, cookies, chewy and moist. And
I have to say, though, now that we're saying the word over and over and over again, I'm starting to get kind of creeped out by it. Now that it started to bug me a little bit.
The word, it loses its power the more you say it. To me, any word, the more you say it, the more ridiculous it sounds.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even think of a word that I find abhorrent enough. I don't even know of a word that I
have a few, but that'll be another day. We've kept poor Philip a long time.
Some vulgar words that I don't know if we would even want to start going there towards.
Oh no,
but
they're not worth it.
Right, but I mean, there are words that nobody likes, but curse words and whatever. But I mean, like, I can't think of regular words like moist that I don't like. But any word that you use over and over again, they just start to sound like sounds after a while. Like, there was a word.
Not to other people that don't use a lot.
The word yucca, like the plant, the vegetable. I don't remember why. When I was a kid, the first time I heard the word, I thought it was like yucky, like gross. It sounds like that. But I just thought it was something I should be repeating. So yucky. And after a while, I couldn't even remember where I'd heard it or why I was saying it. It was just noise, And so whenever I hear it, I'm like, I go back to that moment as a child. Yucky.
Here's a story that may be apocryphal, but I thought was interesting. So I read somewhere that they polled a bunch of linguists, who obviously should understand language and words. And I think they were international. So it wasn't just American or English speaking folks.
If they're Americans, they're not really linguists.
Yeah, no.
right. So, but they were talking to the linguists, and they said, what's the most beautiful, just in terms of sound, all we're talking about is the sound of the word. Not what it means, just the sound. What is the most beautiful sounding word in the English language? And you know what they came up with?
Moist.
No, that'd be good. Good callback. No, they said, here's what they said. Gonorrhea.
No way.
Okay.
That's what they said. The most beautiful word in the English language is apparently, per linguists, gonorrhea.
But if you,
I can see how it kind of has a little.
Yeah, if you break it down, I mean, linguistically, it uses so many syllables and so many words, or so many syllables and so many sounds, and so many letters. Actually, it's a lyrical sound to it.
It has a lyrical sound to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. It's just unfortunate that it.
What it means. That's a nice fun fact.
There you go.
You know what I love? There was an old Calvin and Hobbes comic strip that Calvin realizes that words don't have any meaning in and of themselves. They only mean what we assign them to mean. They're just a collection of letters and sounds.
Arbitrary.
Yeah, arbitrary. So he just starts, and it's like a full week of strips culminating on Sunday with him he and Hobbes are collecting words that he's decided to change the meaning of course, not tell any other humans, just his tiger. And then on Sunday, he ends with deciding to use them in a barrage of conversation with his parents. And his dad's reaction is just like, you know, his mom's reaction is question marks. His dad's reaction is to just play along. So he says to his dad, you know, Dad, I've come to this realization that words are just totally meaningless. And the dad is like, you know, what do you mean? The mom is like, what do you mean? That doesn't make any sense. And he's like, yeah, Mom, words have no meaning at all. Isn't that spam? That's totally cat, right? I mean, doesn't that just absolutely Matchbox? And the mom was like, what? And the dad goes, that's groovy, dude. Yeah, it's like, I love that. I'm like, that's totally gonorrhea.
Yeah, have fun with that. See how how far that takes you.
That was so moist of him. All right, kids. Well, I appreciate your time today, and be nice to everybody. You know, enjoy your day, and I will. I'll have this rendered and posted in the next hour or so. So make sure you share your links with this, Phillip, and I will share them wide with the worldwide community on the World Wide Web, as they say, and. Enjoy your week. I am going to end with one quick thing for us because I think it's fitting. Let's see if I can get it.
Before he does that, I want to say thanks, Phillip. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you for the invite. I had a really fun time, and anytime I'd love to come back if you ever want to have me again.
I want to play 100 words with you because I think that would be a lot of fun. I think having a man of the cloth play a random word generator game is going to be a lot of fun. But really quick before I hit play on this outro song, I want you to share your links with us again. Tell us what they are.
Yep, it's peopleschurchjacks.org.
Got it. All right. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and see you guys soon. Hopefully in person before too long.
Yes. Yeah.
Saturday,